We're going to go ahead and get started, and we want to thank you all for coming out today and this first Sunday of the new year. And there's probably no better way that we could start than to begin a conversation that would help us bridge understanding and unite our human family. So we're glad to gather in that spirit. I am the Reverend Leslie Takahashi, and I serve in this congregation, and am very glad to welcome all of you here on behalf of our congregation. We're glad to be working with the Interfaith Council to be hosting this. But because this is the congregation that I serve, I get to tell you the very important information in case you don't know, that the restrooms are down the hall and out to the left, to the right. So if you need that at any time during our conversation, please feel free to partake. And we are again very happy to have you here and to begin and continue an important conversation. I want to introduce the Reverend Will McGarvey, who is the Executive Director of the Interfaith Council and my dear colleague, and he will also bring greetings.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you. We are so grateful that you're here. This is the first of many conversations we're hoping to host throughout the county. We have another one scheduled at Sojourner Truth Presbyterian Church in Richmond on Thursday, January 14th at 7 p.m. And it will be some overlap with the panel that you'll hear today and some new voices, especially from West County, to be able to continue these conversations on loving our Muslim neighbors. And that begins with getting to know our Muslim neighbors. And we have a great panel of Muslim and Christians from the council here today to talk about the state of Islam and what it's like to be a Muslim in America today. If you read this morning's paper, you saw that there was and there's copies of this article from today's paper, the Contra Costa Times, on the table in the back. We had an open house at the Walnut Creek Islamic Center where Amer Arame leads prayers on a regular basis. He's a member of our council, and he'll be a member of the panel today. And we had over 100 people there for that conversation to be in solidarity around resisting terrorism in all of its forms, and uniting with the Muslim community to remind them that they are very much a part of our community. So you're welcome to take one of those. We also have some of our interfaith cards. Our new, what's nice is that it has a bunch of different interfaith symbols on it. Our new motto is envisioning a world of interfaith peace. And we do have t-shirts with this image on it. If you'd like to have those, you can contact our office or email me, and I'll make sure that you get connected with our wonderful new t-shirts as well. So the bookmarks are back there for you, and on our website you'll notice whenever we come together and make a public statement, part of which is quoted in the article in today's paper, we do so as a reminder that we belong to each other, that my being a Christian isn't threatened by meeting a Muslim, or a Jew, or a Sikh, or a Buddhist, or a Unitarian Universalist. And that I actually get to learn more about my own faith when I'm in relationship with others. And so we're so grateful to each of the panelists. We're going to have them introduce themselves a little later once they come up here. We have a short video we wanted to show you, but we're so grateful that you're here. And keep an eye on our website to see when future events like this will be happening in different parts of the county. We have requests from Byron, Clayton, Pittsburgh, and Concord as well. So thank you so much, and I'll turn it over to Ranwa, who will introduce our film.
Good afternoon. My name is Ranwa Hamami. I am the intern minister here at Mount Diablo Unitarian Universalist Church, and I'm very grateful to see so many faces here. Like was already said, this will be an opportunity for us to have a deeper conversation about getting to know our Muslim neighbors. And so we open this afternoon with a video that sort of talks about some of the myths and some of the realities of what it means to be Muslim in the United States. And it is a particular narrative that hopefully our panel will then talk about in more detail, complexify, and nuance. And if it brings up any questions for you, whether it's in the video or in some of the statements made by the panel later on, we have yellow note cards that are in the back with pens and pencils. And so for the second half of the panel, we will be taking questions, which the moderators will read out loud and our panelists will be able to answer. So first, our video, and then we will begin.
So what are some of the stereotypes you've heard people say about Muslims?
Muslims are terrorists. Muslim women are oppressed.
You know, go back home. You're a foreigner.
Not all Muslims are terrorists, but all terrorists are Muslim.
Muslims are un-American.
They're all Arab.
The Quran teaches hate.
Such stereotypes are widespread, but are they true?
In recent years, there have been dozens of polls conducted worldwide and right here in the United States. American Muslims are an integral part of our society.
You see Muslims in media, in comedy, in acting, in medicine, law, engineering, business. They're engaged in politics. They're engaged in starting their own organizations that are benefiting the community. So Muslim Americans are really tapped into almost every sector imaginable.
They're job creators. 24% have started their own companies. American Muslims are largely middle class and mainstream.
American Muslims are like other Americans, with comparable percentages watching entertainment television, following professional or college sports, and recycling household materials. The U.S. government estimates the American Muslim population at around 7 million.
There are Muslims who have immigrated from literally every other part of the earth. It would be impossible to talk about Muslims in America without talking about African Americans. So you have an extremely diverse pool of ethnic and national diversity.
They are as likely as the average American to attend a religious service, as likely to say that religion is important to them. They're actually slightly more likely to believe that people of other faiths have a chance at salvation. According to Gallup research, American Muslims are the most likely faith community to condemn attacks on civilians. They're also the least likely faith community to sympathize or say that it's ever justified to attack deliberately killing civilians. Now, that's the reality of American Muslims. Unfortunately, the perception among many in the public is totally different.
Only 27% of Americans polled have a favorable view of Islam. Some might say that the reason for this is obvious. But is it?
Most Muslims reject violence, but that's not what the West media focuses on. So you can have hundreds of Muslim leaders denouncing violence, and that will never make it to the newspapers or on TV or anywhere.
Certainly it's a fact that there are some Muslims out there who want to do harm to others, but I have seen nothing to suggest that Muslims as a community or Islam as a religion is more likely to lead to people to violence.
Terrorism in America is sort of almost a melting pot. There are a lot of different types of motivations that drive terrorist attacks in the United States. Very few of the attacks that have actually been carried out have been motivated by Islamism. I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding that Muslims are carrying out attacks and they're always targeted at Christians or at non-Muslims, but it is much more often the case that their actual victims are Muslims.
According to the National Counterterrorism Center, Muslims worldwide are the main targets of extremist violence and are between 82 to 97% of those killed or injured in terrorist attacks. Then why are Muslims mainly presented as the perpetrators of terrorism rather than as the primary victims? Why don't more Americans view average, faithful Muslims as the true representatives of Islam rather than the extremists?
if you feel that other group is threatening, you impute all kinds of vice and evil. You reduce them to stereotypes, and often you use the most extreme member of the other group as representative of that stereotype.
What fear does to people, according to neuroscience, is it increases their acceptance of authoritarianism, conformity, and prejudice.
The result is the marginalization of Muslims in America's civic, social, and political life.
Society is telling them that they're not a part of the American society. They're not a part of the fabric of this country.
In a 2010 Gallup poll, almost half of all American Muslims reported experiencing racial or religious discrimination in the past year. So let's ask again, are these negative perceptions fair? The extremists quote from the Quran. Isn't terrorism in the Quran?
The Quran does speak about terrorism, but it uses a very specific word. In Arabic, it's called irjaf. And this word irjaf means crooked action to instill fear and violence in people, but that fear and that violence is based on hypocrisy. So according to the Quranic paradigm, terrorism or extremist behavior is really an acting out of hypocrisy.
Muslim scholars have written a letter to the leader of ISIS. We are appealing to him by using the Islamic knowledge and Islamic teaching to say, this is not what Islam is all about. What he is teaching does not represent the teaching of the Holy Quran. The Holy Quran says that whoever take a life of innocent person, as if have taken the life of all humanity, and whoever save one life, as if have saved the life of all humanity.
The Quran clearly says there is no compulsion in religion. You can't force anyone to convert to your beliefs, whether they're political beliefs, economic beliefs, religious beliefs. The Quran obviously is very clear about the sanctity of life and respecting everyone's freedom to practice. Whoever wills, let them believe. Whoever wills, don't let them believe. Clear cut.
One of the first things that any student of the Islamic tradition learns growing up is the prophetic tradition that says, show mercy to those on earth, and the one in the heavens, or God, will show mercy to you. And that's really the cornerstone of what Islam teaches.
Out of my childhood, having grown up as the only Muslim American family in a strong conservative Christian community, I found that for us as children and young people, it didn't matter the color of our skin or the faith that we followed, that we came together based on a shared love of God, our shared values.
1/3 of American Muslims report working to solve a problem or improve a condition in their community. 75% have donated to or assisted local charities.
Muslim doctors decided to establish a compassionate network of medical professionals who provide medical services and healthcare free of charge to everybody, to a person of Islamic background, a Jewish, a Christian, or a person who have no faith.
There are more than 20,000 Muslim physicians in the United States, and they operate over 100 free medical clinics around the country.
So we're actually seeing Muslims respond to Muslim extremists with the teachings of their own faith, basically debunking their actions, their extremism, with the core teachings of what Islam really is. What happened in North Carolina when these 3 Muslim students were killed was really traumatic for the Muslim community. And instead of just responding with a statement of condemnation, they responded with love. And a campaign came out of that to feed our local hungry. And within 1 month, we have nearly 300 mosques, Muslim student groups hosting canned food drives around America to feed their hungry neighbors.
When there have been national disasters, American Muslims have helped provide relief. Answering the call of their faith, they serve and sacrifice for their fellow Americans in many ways.
Muslims are involved in every aspect of the United States of America.
They're not the problem, they're the solution.
Fear has become toxic. We have to unite.
Islam really is a cohesive, complete paradigm of way of life. And when you take it all, then it makes sense. You can coexist with others. You can build wonderful things. You can collaborate. You can be part of civilization.
One of the most beautiful stories that I love of the Prophet Muhammad is his first statement upon entering Medina after suffering years of persecution in Mecca. His first words to the people of Medina were to spread peace, to feed the hungry, maintain ties with your family, and to pray at night when others are sleeping. And if you look at that statement, it's pretty amazing because the first three things are all about your relationship with other people. It didn't say to feed the hungry Muslims. It didn't say to spread peace to Muslims only. But it's really about connecting to humanity. Before even your personal connection with God, it was your personal connection with other human beings.
Every day, the beliefs of American Muslims are called into question. Don't be fooled by the actions of extremists. Speak up against unfair stereotypes. Share the facts about American Muslims. They represent the real truth about Islam. For more videos and information about American Muslim facts, visit AmericanMuslimFacts.com. Hashtag Muslims in America.
So we are going to invite our panel up. That's a good resource for those of you, I know many of you have asked what's something I can send to friends or forward on. It's just something that can be shared around and we hope can spread out from this particular event. I'm going to invite our panelists to come up. We've got such a wonderful panel that we actually have to move our equipment to have room for everybody on our dais here. So just give us 1 second and we're going to invite Will to come up and facilitate introductions as well.
Dr. Jaws has brought some copies of the DVD for American Muslims Fact versus Fiction, and they're in the back table. There's another one called Nadia's Ramadan from the Unity Productions Foundation that's back there. It's a short film about Muslim holidays for public school classrooms. So as we invite our panelists to come forward, please come on up and we'll give each of you a minute to briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll move into the panel conversations.
The video is on YouTube, so anybody can have it, have the link to it.
I was just reminded the video's on YouTube, so if you just look for American Muslims Facts versus Fiction, you can find it there too. Ranma, do you want to start us off there, or you want to? Maybe we'll just have Eileen start since she's on the left end, and she'll just do some brief introductions.
I'm Eileen Lindsay. I'm pastor of the Walnut Creek United Methodist Church. I've been in Walnut Creek for 9 years now, and I've served the United Methodist Church in Davis, in Sacramento, and the Mendocino Coast.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone who invited me here today. My name is Rabia Miradian, and I am a graduate of Star King at GTU, and I am a writer, I'm an activist, and I am here today to hopefully impart some information as your neighbor.
I've already introduced myself. I'm Ranmo Hamami. I'm the intern minister here, and many of you know I identify as a UU Muslim, and I am looking forward to hearing some of the wisdom here from people who've been in this community longer than I have.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. My name is Amara Rain. I am a member of the Islamic Center of Walnut Creek, president of the Islamic Community Outreach of California. Also, I am a lecturer at Diablo Valley College and California State University in Hayward, and I have been frequent visitor of this church. And since 2001, I met many of you, and really I believe with all my heart in the importance of interfaith work and interfaith understanding and cooperation.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Abdul Rahman. I'm from Antioch. I'm a resident of US since 1981. Married with 5 kids and now 2 grandkids. I'm a network engineer by profession. I am the trustee for board of, I'm a chairman of board of trustees in Islamic Center of East Bay in Antioch. A delegate also. I consider myself community activist, I guess. I try to be involved with people of all faith because I think it makes my faith better. So my hope is to go and be able to touch with at least a few of you in a humanitarian way, in a humility way, so that we can go ahead and start connecting with each other as children of God, hopefully.
Assalamu alaikum, namaste, shalom alaikum, peace be unto you all. My name is Ijaz Naqvi, and I'm a practicing physician and a born-again Muslim. I call myself a born-again Muslim. So my original date of birth I'm not going to talk about. I was born again about 25 years ago. I'm past president of Islamic Center of Zara in Pleasanton. I'm also on the board of Interfaith Council of Contra, Costa County. I am on the board of an organization called Islamic Scholarship Fund, and its main purpose is to remove these myths and also address the problem that Muslims are underrepresented in the areas that affect public policy and public opinion, such as media. I'm a firm supporter of UPF. They are the makers of these 2 videos that we talked about. And I'm also an author, and the book is actually in the back, along with the 2 videos that Bill talked about. Is titled The Quran with or Against the Bible, a topic-by-topic review for the investigative mind. It's a comparative analysis of the 2 most read books in the history. So I'm going to actually limit myself here because I know you're here to talk more about the issues at hand.
I am Maram Bata, and I am an engineer, electrical engineer, and worked for over 20 years in corporate America and HP, and now I'm a real estate agent, so I have my own business. I work with Coldwell Banker Orinda for the last 12 years. And I started working with Interfaith 4 years ago. I am a part of the women's circles. This is how I started, and now I am in the steering committee of Neighbor to Neighbor and also in the Interfaith Council. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to let you hold on to that because we're going to get back to you all in just a moment. So it is we want to, again, just take our time to appreciate the folks who have agreed to be on our panel and to share their experience. And we know from our life and from the video and from our knowledge of what it's like to be a human being in a divided world, that we live in a culture in which we are often educated by messages that we would not wish to be our educating messages. So events like this are important because they give us the chance to fill our lives with more accurate information. And that allows us to be better allies and better supporters of a world of peace. So it's a very important thing to come together in this way. And I want to also say, I was driving in today to church this morning, and my entire drive-in from Martinez was all stories on this topic. The entire NPR, like 20 minutes of my drive, was all about the divisions, the myths, the hostility that the Muslim communities are facing around the world. And it was the top thing that we were talking about. So there's really just it's a very timely issue. And we pulled this together in the 2 weeks before the end of the year. So I want to thank all these wonderful folks, a number of the people I had the pleasure of serving with on the Interfaith Council and their important work, but to say that they not only responded, but they responded out of busy lives in very short notice. So we're very grateful to have them here today. So as Renwa said, I want to just say we're going to take the first part of this. We're going to take some questions that we've all agreed on that we want to cover to just get information out there, and then there are cards out there for people to ask questions, and that'll allow us to group questions together and kind of get the most questions out while we have these wonderful resources before us. So let's jump in with this, and I also want to say that my experience in doing a lot of work across racial and cultural difference is that when we are talking about things that we are not familiar with, it often does cause that kind of reaction that was mentioned in the video, where we feel a sense of fear or estrangement, and when we do, that can make us tense and it can make us more reactive. So I'm just going to invite us all to take a deep breath and be present here, because we're here in the spirit of unity and learning and inquiry, and I want to celebrate that. We want to talk a little bit about these myths, and I think the video did a good job of putting some of them out there. But we live in a culture in which people are educated about, the people who are not Muslim are educated about Muslims through some very, I would say, extreme coverage, right? Coverage of the extreme. So what I'd like to ask each of our panelists to respond to on this, we won't probably do everybody on every question, but this one I think is important, is what is a particularly harmful myth surrounding Muslims and the Islamic traditions that you particularly feel needs to be dispelled? And I'm just going to go down the row on this one, okay?
It's when you hear it all the time, it's all Muslims. And without any differentiating, like there is 1.6 billion Muslims from every country in the world, and to put it and paint it with the same brush, it doesn't make sense. If you look at your own family, which has the same mother and father and the same moral, the same religion, and you see your siblings are not the same, how could 1.6 billion be the same?
Thank you. And thank you. I want to also just mention with our microphones that they like to have an intimate relationship with you. So just, if you can be a little closer with them, then everyone will be able to hear you. Thank you. Great start.
There are actually a lot of myths. In one of my next books, the title may be The 101 Myths About Islam.
Yeah, there you go. You can't do 101 ijaz. You have to pick one or two.
I think one of the biggest myths is that we have Islam in America or Islam in West are on divergent paths. Or you can be a good Muslim but not be a good American, or good American and cannot be a good Muslim. And nothing can be further from the truth. And but the reason we have all these notions is because what you hear is all these polls have shown negative perception, but they also show that most Americans don't know an American in person. And therein lies the problem. So there needs to be a connection, but the second part is the coverage in the media. And I'm going to actually ask you all a question here first. And you don't need to answer to me. Just in your mind, can you name 4 Muslim terrorist organizations? In your mind. Just repeat number 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Just take about 10 seconds. How many of you actually named them? Raise your hands. Okay, a lot of you. Okay. Can you name 4 Muslims who won Nobel Prize? There were 12 Nobel Prize winners. 7 of them actually were on peace. And 6 of the 12 actually have won a Nobel Prize since 2001. But nobody knows about it. Everyone knows about Osama bin Laden, everyone knows about Al-Qaeda, and everyone knows about ISIS. But nobody knows about any of the good work. How many of you have ever heard the name Abdul Sattar Idi? Raise your hand.
Say it again into the mic, Ijaz, a little bit.
Okay. How many of you heard the name Abdul Sattar Idi? 2 people I've seen, 3, okay. Abdul Sattar Idi, if he was not a Pakistani, if he was not a Muslim, he would have won a Peace Prize or some kind of award. He is a walking and talking and a functioning Red Cross all in one. He's been working for 40 years in Pakistan, He has ambulances, he works for the widows, he works for the orphans, he works with the dead and burial. Nobody cares about those people. But therein lies the problem. Nobody knows about Idi. Everyone knows about all the bad people. And therein lies the problem.
Boy, that's a little trick question, isn't it? A myth. I would have to say that people don't know enough Muslims, and that's why it's different. When it's different, it somehow is not right. And unfortunately, our politicians don't do a very good job of trying to go and clear the air, and they like to go ahead and actually cloud it some more for their benefits, right? And so for us, for me, as somebody who immigrated here, who loves being a citizen of this country and loves being in the community where I can go ahead and make a difference, a family man. When 9/11 happened, my wife was actually covering her head, had the hijab on. My 3 little girls were very young. They didn't have to go put the hijab on. They had the hijab on too. And they were harassed just in school and on the road. My wife was stopped in the middle of the road with a lady who was approaching her with a baseball bat. And, I am very optimistic. So I told her, yes, there are kooks everywhere. We know about them, right? And she said, it's easy for you to say that. It was really scary for me. And I'm not going to wear this anymore. And I said, yes, it was your decision to go and put it on. It's your decision if you want to go and take it off to feel safe. And it doesn't make any difference it doesn't help her in any way to go ahead and put on a guard to show her love for the religion of God when she herself is not protected. And so, this is how we had to go ahead and live with experiences throughout. In 2007, Antioch Mosque was deliberately burned. Okay, that's when we realized who our friends are, who our neighbors are. And that's when I got connected with the Interfaith community, and thank God I got connected, because I would be sitting here right now because of that. So with all the negativity, all the trials and tribulation that comes through, there is a silver lining. And we should go ahead and look into it and see how we can go ahead and benefit from it. So that was my little story.
50 years ago, I was assigned as diplomat in the Iraqi embassy in Washington, D.C. And after returning back to Iraq, I was asked, what did impress you the most in the United States of America? I said, democracy. Although at that time, as you may recall, there were the Vietnam War and the protests against the Vietnam War and all the riots in Washington, D.C., but nevertheless, I believed in the importance of democracy. And since then, I began thinking about, as a Muslim, what is the position of Islam on democracy? And after that, I was assigned to India, and India is the largest democratic country in the world. And really, I communicated with people to understand the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi and the role of Muslims in the Indian society. Although they were subjected to discrimination, but nevertheless, I believe that the best way for Muslims in India at that time to practice democracy and to emphasize the importance of democracy. Later on, I worked in the United Nations, and I wrote a paper called Islam and Democracy. And I sought the approval of the highest authority in the United Nations to present that paper to a conference of Islamic social scientists. And I told them at that time that democracy is the way for the Muslim countries and even for Muslims today in America. If we strengthen our belief in democracy and Democracy, in my opinion, means the First Amendment of the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, the freedom of expression, the freedom of religion, the freedom of press, the right to assemble, and the right to petition the government, plus free and fair elections. And therefore, I believe in the importance for Muslims, whether here in America or all over the world, to practice democracy and to practice non-violence. The best way, I always remind my students today about the importance of the contribution of Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was able to achieve great success here in America by pressing the issue of nonviolence. Therefore, we reject violence, and many people have misconception that Islam encourages violence. No, that is not correct. That is absolutely not true. Islam is against violence. And even I mentioned the practice of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He was for 13 years in Mecca and was subjected to harassment and attack, and he never used violence. And then he migrated to Medina and stayed 10 years there. And he did not wage war, but others waged war against him, but he defended the community. Therefore, there is a misconception that Islam approves or encourages violence, and that is not true. We are an integral part of the American society. And I said this in Walnut Creek a few days after 9/11. We are an integral part of the American society, and what hurts America hurts us too. And we are very happy to be with the Interfaith Council and with the faith communities like yours, and we are working together to condemn violence, to respect the freedom of expression, the freedom of religion, and we are enjoying our freedom here, and we don't want anyone in the name of religion or in the name of class struggle to use violence against the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the myth that comes to my mind is the fact that when there is a violent attack that happens, that Muslims are not speaking out. And unfortunately, we've seen in the video and in voices of this panel that Muslims are always speaking out to condemn violence. And that is, the media doesn't always lift up that voice. But I do also want to nuance that myth with the question of why do we ask Muslims to condemn violent attacks? There's this expectation that comes with that myth, and that isn't necessarily a fair expectation. When there are other attacks that happen, any sort of violence, nobody asked, for example, in Charleston, when a white man went and killed 9 black members of a black AME church, nobody asked all white people to apologize for that. And so we need to think about what it is we're asking of Muslims when there is an attack that people say they are doing in the name of Islam.
Hello? Okay, great. I turned it off so there wouldn't be any interference, but one of the questions I'm asked is, are you forced to put the veil on? Are you oppressed because you wear this veil? What does it mean? Why do you dress the way you dress? So many people believe that there is no option, that there are no choices for Muslim women, and there absolutely are. There are as many varieties of modesty and hijab, and my whole outfit is hijab, not just the scarf, that you could put your finger on. African Americans in this country women have always covered their heads in some fashion. And that started in the South especially in Louisiana, when slaves were forced to wear what's called a tignon to cover their hair. And so there are times as an African American Muslim when I am asked by other Muslims, "Are you Muslim?" even though I'm covered. So we have like this sort of muddy area sometimes where people have to figure out where I am in the whole scheme of things as a black person. When I dress like this, it's more well defined. And after the San Bernardino situation, I decided I had an option. I could stop wearing hijab and make myself invisible on the radar of racists, of bigots. Or I could continue to be who I am, and I can stand up for Islam and our right to dress and wear whatever we want in America. And if anybody wants to challenge me or ask me, then they can do that. Unlike London, I was in London in November, up until November, people were actually, women in hijab were actually being attacked on buses. And in the tube, one woman was pushed off the sidewalk into the path of a train. We haven't had those things here because I believe that America is a little bit different. And it's a blessing to be a Muslim in America, in my opinion. Americans are quite different. It's a blessing to be a Muslim in the Bay Area. When my friends in London and other places ask me, well, gee, how are things going after San Bernardino? I say, you know what? Things are going pretty darn good, because Americans won't usually stand for a lot of extreme behavior. It'll get put out like a fire very quickly if it raises its head. And I want to point out as well that the people who believe that wearing hijab or veil is oppressive, I would point to you that there are generations of nuns who have worn veils. I would point to you that there are Amish women who cover, and nobody questions whether or not they're oppressed. And also, in Corinthians, in the Bible, Paul says that women should cover when they prophesy, and I interpret that as pray. And so that's pretty much the same thing that I'm doing here. So I think it's a form of rebellion, and it's a form of standing up also for who I am as a Muslim woman, not to take off the hijab right now. In fact, I think it's more important that right now I continue to wear it and be identifiable. Thank you.
Well, I must say that I'd been a minister of a Christian denomination for 20 years before I knew any Muslims. And I think that's sad and incredible. I was in Davis, and I remember that it was 2001, but it was before 9/11. And I got a letter from a Methodist in Stockton encouraging, as did the rabbi and the Muslim community in Davis, and a few other Christians, to engage in something called Celebration of Abraham, to get together, to meet with each other, and talk about what the three Abrahamic faiths have in common. Well, I had no idea what they had in common, really. Well, maybe more so with Judaism, but certainly not with Islam. So we started meeting together, eating in each other's homes, and it was really mind-opening for me. Like, I never knew that Muslims hold Jesus in high regard as a prophet. Never knew that, just didn't know that. I mean, that's incredible to me. And we agreed to check our politics at the door, which was an absolute necessity in Davis, and we really talked about what our faith traditions. Well, we planned this big event for the community, and then 9/11 happened, and 500 people came to our event. When we probably would have gotten a crowd like this otherwise. So I think that all.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to ask a couple other questions. Thank you all for those deep and considered responses. I'm going to ask in our next questions that perhaps we have a couple respondents, those who feel most compelled to respond to a particular question. And also, knowing a couple of you I've just met today and had the privilege to meet you today, a number of you I've known for a number of years and know that each of you could give us a whole soliloquy and seminar on any of these questions. So I will ask you to be brief in your questions so we can get to some other things and questions for folks here as well. But then the next question that I want to ask you is, what is a less known feature of the Islamic traditions that you believe, if it was shared, would help bridge, do the kind of bridging that Eileen was just talking about, bridging across religious and cultural difference? Is there something in the faith that people should know about? And let Maram start.
I will share the same.
Whoops.
Hello?
Did you get turned off?
Sorry. I'm electrical engineer. I should know how to do that. There you go. Thank you. I agree with Elaine that I think if everybody knows that actually to be a Muslim, you have to believe in all of the prophets. And we have which there is 25 of them mentioned in the Quran. But the major 5 are Abraham, Noah, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace be upon them. And also to be a Muslim, you have to believe in all of the books. So we believe in Torah and also the Bible. If people knew that, they will start at least the conversation to talk. We did as the Women's Circle, we did at LOPC, we did an Advent with our Christian colleagues, and I read from the Quran a chapter, verses from a chapter, which is called Maryam. She's the only woman, she has a chapter, Maryam, which is Mary, on her, dedicated to her and her story of like the birth of Jesus. And if people knew that, and everybody came, it's like, we couldn't believe that this is in the Quran. It's almost the same what's in the Bible. So if people knew that, I think it will open doors.
It would help bridge, yeah, thank you. A couple others? Yeah.
So I'll say something along the same lines as you said, Mara. There is also a version of golden rule in Islam. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, you have not believed until you wish for your brother what you wish for yourself. So that's the golden rule, the Islamic version of it. It means a lot more than just what it says. It simply means that, we talk about worshiping and theological differences and whatnot. At the end of the day, it's about what you do to others or for others. That's the important thing. And Islam emphasizes that. In fact, there's another hadith of Prophet Muhammad that says that if you want God to be kind to you, you need to be kind to God's creatures. Underline the word creatures, not humans, not Muslims. This could have said, you're not Muslim until you actually are kind to other Muslims. Or you're kind, or God is going to be kind to you if you're kind to other humans. It actually says, if you want God to be kind to you, you need to be kind to all the creatures of God. And that's beyond humans, that's being kind to animals, and that's being kind to plants. To not burn down the plant. And in fact, Prophet Muhammad emphasized growing trees, especially the trees that bear fruits and shade.
Thank you. Rabia, you wanted to get in on that?
I just have a short.
Well, we're going to jump down to the end, and I'll come back.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes. One of the things that impressed me greatly, I'm a convert to Islam. And one of the things that impressed me greatly coming into Islam was the adab of Muslims, was the gentleness and the hospitality which is extended to everybody. this is not always the case, I guess, in most of American settings that I've frequented. And it just appeared that throughout my experience, I was always quite welcomed wherever I went. Not only was I welcome, but a sort of gentleness and appreciation for me as a convert and as a human being was extended to me. And I always invite my friends to the mosque, people who have never experienced Islam. I always invite them, I say, you must come, because what you will see is the real Islam, and that is the people, how they welcome you, how they sit amongst you, how you're welcome amongst them, and how you're treated in general. You will see it is a big difference between what is depicted in the media with the screaming terrorists who want to behead everybody. When you step into a mosque, that's not what you experience. You experience welcome. And so as a Christian coming into Islam, I was very surprised, and it was very humbling, and I most certainly can say that that is one of the most outstanding and wonderful parts of Islam that I carry with me now.
Thank you. I'm going to let Abdul said he had a short piece, and then we're going to move on to the next question. We'll start with the mayor for the next one.
So one of the things that I believe most people don't know here is the fact that the Quran itself says that God says in Quran that we have made you into different tribes, different families, different religions so that you may understand each other. So it's not about, just being here to convert everybody, like the notion is right now, with the media. So that's, I just want to share that because I think a lot of people just don't know that.
Great. And the next question we have is about kind of a continuation of this. What are some of the stories and teachings within your understanding of the Islamic tradition that reflect a different narrative from the more violent ones that we hear about in the media coverage? And we got a question from the audience I'm going to integrate in here about, could you say more about the concept of nonviolent jihad? And Amir, I wonder if you'd be willing to start with that question.
I would like just to add something to what my brother said, and this is connected with the question. When God said we created you into tribes and peoples and tribes so you might know each other. But the most honored in the eyes of Allah is the most pious. So piety, which means serving humanity, doing the best for people, that is the criterion which God would differentiate between people. To what extent we are serving the community, to what extent we are establishing peace on earth, to what extent we are helping the poor and the needy. And the other thing I would like to mention, hadith, which means speech for Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He said, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ مَنْ نَفَعَ النَّاسِ. The best among people who serve or benefit others in the best way. He did not mention to serve Muslims or people in general. So the question of serving humanity, serving the poor and the needy, there is no distinction between Muslims and non-Muslims. And that is the basic issue for us. Because some people, they said that Muslims are egocentric or they are just secluded from the community. No, Muslims are trying to reach out to others. And I mentioned to my colleagues that Indonesia became the most populous country, and how people converted to Islam in Indonesia, not by the sword, but traders from the Muslim countries went to Indonesia, and they saw them that they are dealing with them in honesty and in a humane manner. And they told them, why you are doing this different than other traders? They said, because we are Muslims, and God commanded us to deal with people in the best manner we can. And therefore, people began converted to Islam. Not by sword, as many people say. If you take the 1.5 billion Muslims in the world, more than 1 billion people came to Islam, not by sword.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll also address the question from the audience about the jihad. Or the,
Thank you, Petrus.
So again, one of the myths, probably one of the biggest myths, is about jihad. Maybe it's second to hijab. Jihad does not mean kill the infidel. That's the other notion. So, jihad means kill all the infidels. Number one, actually, the infidel is not a Quranic or Islamic term. It's actually a Christian term, by the way. The second is that jihad simply means to struggle. Okay? And there are two forms of jihad. One is the military form. The second is non-military form. There's a jihad, the akbar or the greater jihad. That actually is the struggle within yourself. So the struggle that you have with your own nafs or your heart is the bigger or the greater jihad. What does that mean? It means actually struggling and fighting your emotions, fighting your urges, and that's the bigger struggle. The military form is always a defensive war, and there are many verses in the Quran, especially 2:190. If you want to take some notes, read that. It clearly says that it has to be defensive war. You cannot attack someone. In fact, there's a verse, this is again to this question, which is, what are some of the lesser known teachings? One of the verses from the Quran is, you actually see all these stories about these Muslims burning down churches and synagogues. There's a very clear and specific verse in the Quran that actually asks to protect the churches, the synagogues, and these other places where God's words and praises are celebrated every day. And it says, God help those who help his cause. In other words, protecting the churches and the synagogues and the monasteries and mosques is actually helping God's cause.
Thank you.
That's another very specific verse in the Quran.
Okay, short, because I want to move forward. Thank you, Amir.
I want to say that here for us Muslims in America, since we are living in a democratic country and we have freedom of expression, therefore jihad for us here is only by peaceful means. There is no jihad by violent means in America or in any democratic country that respects the rule of law.
Thank you. I'm going to move us to another question, and it also corresponds to some of the questions we've been getting from the group here, and so I'm going to integrate them. And it has to do with some of the struggles you've experienced as a Muslim in the U.S., and I'm going to ask Rabia to answer this one as a black Muslim, because that's a very specific experience as well. But some of the folks in the would like to know what some of particularly how you address Islamophobia and how you deal with fear and pain in the lives of your children as well. So if someone would be willing to start. Rabia, would you be willing to start?
Well, sure. As an African American, I think necessarily, especially at this point in history, I have to sort of live in two worlds. Because as you well know, if you follow the news, that the black community right now is under siege of sorts. We have a problem with police violence in black neighborhoods, and it has to be addressed. Racism is not gone from America since the Civil Rights Movement. We still have racism in America. You only have to look at the situation with Dylan Roof and with Donald Trump and the people he attracts to see that political correctness and being polite and being someone who loves your neighbor and who wants to live peacefully with someone, it's becoming unpopular. It's becoming more popular to be extreme and to be a white extremist at that. As a black person right now in America, it's a very difficult road because you do want to be supportive to the cause, but at the same time, being a Muslim, I also want to be true to Islam. So that is a very difficult place to be. I'm an activist and I'm also part of Black Lives Matters. And I agree 100% with what Black Lives Matters does, with what they call for in the future to do, because change needs to happen. As a Muslim, do I find that their tactics are in any way counter to my religion? And I say absolutely not. Because justice is part of Islam, and we call for justice, and we call for fairness and equality among all people. And if black people don't have their rights in this country, just look around you, because you will be next. And then who will be next after that? And you can see it's a slippery slope. So I think when you see what we have had to deal with in this country, and black African Muslims have been in this country, at least conservatively, since the 1600s, okay? So when you see what we've had to deal with in this country to exist, even put aside the fact that some of us are Muslim now, some of us are not, we necessarily have to pay attention to some of the things that are going on in the world and in this country that affect us directly. And as a Muslim woman, I have both the situations with the xenophobia that is existing about Muslims in general, and I also have the situation with what African Americans are dealing with. And so I tend to apply myself to both, and I tend to give both equal energy. And just yesterday, I was at a rally for Tamir Rice. I believe most of you know who Tamir Rice is. And I was approached by a reporter from Al Jazeera, and he approached me and he said, "Sister," he says, "I just had to talk to you. I never see a Muslim woman in hijab carrying a protest sign, so I really need to talk to you." I was a little embarrassed because I said, am I sticking out that much? But the point of the matter is yes, you do stick out if you're wearing hijab and you're at a Black Lives Matter rally.
Thank you.
But even Black Muslim lives matter.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just wanted to say, while we're on this particular topic, for those in this congregation and others, we'd be delighted to have you as our guest. We have a speaker from the Black Lives Matter movement who will be with us next weekend after service. So please keep out your information on that as well. Just were you going to? Okay.
So I'll just add to Rabia. So, you are a Muslim and you are black and you're a woman. Other than that, you know nothing about prejudice. And so I was talking to an African American friend of mine, and he said, we were talking about Jesus, and people will say, he was Middle Eastern, or he had blue eyes. And he said, no, Jesus was black. So why? So read the gospel. He always uses the word brother. He's always called everybody brother. And he said, there's a second and bigger reason. So what? He said, he never received a fair trial.
Yeah.
Another myth is that women are oppressed. And I'll tell you, this is a personal story, a true story, not a joke. So my wife, Farhana, she has an extended family. It's a really large family. She has multiple cousins. When they have a get-together, they're like 80, 90 people. So one of her cousins got married to a quote-unquote a white American guy. And he's a Christian. He hasn't converted, quote-unquote. So they've been married for about 8 or 9 years now. And they have a lot of get-togethers. And they see, obviously, a lot of couples and so on and so forth. So one day we were just sitting a few months ago, and he said, I've been married for 7 years. I've seen how the women in your family, he was talking to his wife, really dominate your husband. So when I see these CNN stories about women being oppressed, I have no idea what they're talking about, because all I see are oppressed husbands in your family. And he was right.
Thank you, Vishwas. Yes.
But the experience I have had is that at the airports, unfortunately. So I used to just carry my stethoscope in my briefcase and I'll just pass through. It's not true anymore. I've been stopped boarding a flight from Dubai to here.
Yes.
And so my 2 children, wife boarded, but I was stopped, and I'm going through some whatever process. And it's 2 hours there still checking something. And we were about this close to missing the flight. We finally got on the flight. We arrived here in San Francisco. And so they passed through the custom, but they see my passport. So I asked, what's going on? He said, well, your name is on the list. So I said, well, okay, fine, find out what's going on. And they checked, and then finally said, well, actually, no, there's nothing. And it happened several times. So I said, well, can you just actually link my passport so that I'm not on the list? I have to not go through every time through the same process. They could not do it. He said, well, no, sorry, this is not part of what we do. The other thing, one of my brother's wife is also hijabist. She lives in the Orinda area, and she has a son, and she goes to preschool, and she's very engaged with the school activities. And after the San Bernardino terror attack, things changed. And so she just wore the hijab, went to this activity, and this is a 5-year-old, forget the adults, a 5-year-old, he looked at her, then she started to scream and said, Mommy, she's one of them, she's here. She said, it really killed me. If it was a 30-year-old adult, that would be one thing. It's a 5-year-old who says the same thing, so I don't know how to change the mind of a 5-year-old.
Absolutely, thank you. Renoir?
So I wanted to address the question around what I personally do when it comes to addressing Islamophobia and offer an invitation with that. One of the things that I see Islamophobia coming out of is, we've talked about it already, this very singular narrative about what it means to be Muslim or what it means to be a follower of the Islamic traditions. And I explicitly use the Islamic traditions, you hear that bias in the questions this afternoon, to talk about the fact that there is such a breadth of diversity and how they are interpreted and understood based on people's experiences and cultures. And so that's one thing that I try to do. And then another thing that I offer as an invitation is to consider how within the Islamic traditions, there are those of us with multiple kinds of identities that are marginalized in other ways, whether it is around being Black and Muslim, whether it's around being LGBTQ and Muslim, whether it's around being a woman, and various other identities, that we are doing this work in these other areas for racial justice, for LGBTQ justice. And that action is a way that we are complexifying and diversifying the narratives of the Islamic traditions. And when you are doing that work, when you're doing that work in those areas, in environmental justice and that kind of effort, to look for those voices because they're there, and to invite them into that work and to have what they're offering to you be a part of that effort.
Thank you. So we've gotten a lot of questions up here, and I'm also aware that people probably have other things they're going to do at some point during the day, so, including our panelists who are giving us their time. So I'm going to group some questions, and we're probably not going to get to every single one, but I want us to try to do that. I'm going to, again, ask our esteemed panelists. You bring so much wealth of information, but if we can have just a couple people and shorter answers, then we'll try to get through at least some of the questions. So there's a whole handful of questions that I have in my hand here that have to do with people who want to support and reach out to Muslims in the community and be supportive. And we have someone saying, you know, they identifying as an American Jew, as a Unitarian Universalist, people in this church, non-Muslims, and people who particularly want to know how they can help with the Syrian refugees, because they're fearful that they will be treated as terrorists when they come to these shores. So we're going to, I think, Mariam is going to start, and then we'll take just a couple quick answers to this. But it's a very important question.
Speak out. That's in summary. It's if you speak out whenever you hear somebody is talking, like, you know, the myths you heard about, please speak out. Approach your Congress people, the newspaper, your friends, your family, maybe post that video on your Facebook, so people will know that we are Americans and we are so diverse. You cannot just paintbrush us with one paintbrush. So speaking out is very important, and nothing you do is small, because I had a phone call after the sun, and I didn't have any discrimination issues. Maybe I'm not covered, so people didn't know I am a Muslim. But in the community, I'm living in Orinda 15 years, so people know I am a Muslim. So one of the community members called me after San Bernardino and said, I just want to, she never called me, she just called me that day. I was like, why is she calling? And she called me to say, I just want to know you are okay. And if you need anything, I am here, and you are a part of our community. That made my week. So it's even small things, you don't have to do a lot, but, and also we work with ourselves even, like, just you see sometimes othering others, like always like them, us, with other stuff, not only Muslims. I work with I am not only a Muslim, I am a woman, a Muslim, a mother. So we are not none of us is one-dimensional. So if we stop looking at people as one-dimensional, all of our problems will be solved.
Thank you.
I don't have much to add. I think you said it right.
Okay. Rabia, did you want to say anything about that?
Yes, just in terms of what can you do, we started a Facebook page, a group, Support for Muslims, Faith in Action. And if you put that in the search on Facebook, Support for Muslims, Faith in Action. We had one action. I guess all of you know about the attempted or bombing of the mosque in Richmond, California, and that gentleman was caught, or perhaps he wasn't a gentleman. He was caught, and a group of my friends came together, and they had the Richmond community gathers at a mosque to overcome hate threats against them. So what they did was contacted the imam. This is what you can do. Find a mosque, contact the imam, and in this situation, they asked if it would be okay for them to organize outside the mosque, and they love bombed the mosque. They put hearts, flowers, candles, all sorts of beautiful things on the outside of the mosque so that the community could see that this mosque was being surrounded by love, and it was protected with love. And on that same night, the mosque invited everybody in for coffee and donuts. So there's a lot that you can do. Just get out there and just start doing it.
Thank you. And does anyone have information on what's happening with the Syrian refugees, if any organizations are working on that?
I would like to invite you to look at the article by
It's on the back. Yeah.
the president of the Interfaith Council.
There's copies on the back of the,
And
yeah.
Our executive director, Will McGarvey, it is there. And I hope you can do something. If you like the article, if you are concerned about these Muslims who are part of your community, just convey, whether a letter or by telephone, to the Contra Costa Times or any newspaper, that Muslims are just people like us. They are part of the American society, and we don't like to see this utilizing the issue of Muslim or Islamophobia in order to gain votes in the presidential elections. And last Sunday, we had about 100 people from different faiths coming to the Islamic Center of Walnut Creek, and they saw all the Muslims, people like you, and they would love to communicate with you, to have friendship with you. Therefore, we would like you to, even in work, while you are during work hours or after work hours, when you speak to your friends, just convey this message that Muslims are people like us, and we have to promote this kind of understanding and mutual cooperation. If you can write a letter to the Contra Costa Times and respond to this article to say that we would like to end this rhetoric in the election campaigns, singling out Muslims and trying to create a fear and in the heart of the voters that Muslims are a threat to this country. We are not a threat to this country. We love this country. We'd like to be part of the efforts to promote justice, to promote peace and tranquility in this country and all over the world.
Thank you, Amir.
That's my message.
Thank you, Amir. It's good to be with you again. We have a series of questions that have to do with the media coverage about divisions in countries around the world, and particularly in the Middle East, and what that does to perpetuate stereotypes, and particularly a number of questions around what is being done, what can be done to bridge divides between the Shia and Sunni parts of the Muslim family. You just want to take a quick cut at that?
So, the media coverage, again, one thing we have to do is, so I was talking to, so this is about a year and a half ago or so, we had a Muslim producer at one of the Islamic centers in Oakland. And one of the things he mentioned was when a news piece is sent out, or whatever they have, if there are 5 to 10 phone calls, either for or against, is so strong that the producer actually thinks twice. If you didn't like what you saw, and he said, well, no, I actually know a lot of Muslims, this is a negative portrayal, and there are 5 phone calls, you may think, well, 5 phone calls, what the heck? I mean, there's a 2 million viewership, but 5 phone calls, he said, that actually is a strong message. So don't think you are actually are alone wise. If you don't like something, or if you like something and it's a positive portrayal, please call or write to the editors. So like Dr. Orion mentioned, if you like this article and you write something in response to it, it is very strong. That's what you can do. You know, we need to get more engaged with the media in other ways as well. You know, we have always talked about NPR. We need to have more media like that. The problem is with the commercial media. And then when they have a negative portrayal, not only Donald Trump's ratings go up, but when there's a negative portrayal of a Muslim in a CNN show or Fox News, the #1 rated cable show is Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity.
Right.
And the more, so going back to this idea, when I first wrote my book, so one of my publicists called me, and one of the first questions he asked me was this: what's the most controversial thing about your book? What's the most divisive thing about your book? I said, well, my book actually, unfortunately, is not divisive. It's actually bringing people together. So, well, I understand, but when you're promoting the book, you got to be divisive. I think we need to get this out of this way that somehow you have to be negative to be heard.
Thank you. Okay. Does anyone want to comment on the Sunni Shia?
Yeah, just briefly, I just wanted to encourage everybody to really pay attention to what's going on in the news right now. Saudi Arabia just executed a very well-known and respected Shia cleric, and this is going to open up a whole big can of worms in terms of what this country does in response to its good buddy Saudi Arabia and what Iran is going to do. And Iran has promised to do something, yet not spoken of. I think, personally for me, I've lived on both sides of that. I've been associated with the Shias, I've been associated with Sufis and with Sunni Islam, and essentially, I am none of the above. I'm just a Muslim. And I would like to see the day come when that's all that we look at, but we're not there yet. So I would say the most important thing for all of you is to educate yourself on how this schism between these sects began, so that when they're talking about this on television, that you're not going, well, what's a Shia and what's a Sunni and what's a this and this. Really understand it, really explore it. It's not that hard to understand. And understand that it is something that splits up the Muslim world to some extent, not to a large extent. Thank goodness for America and American Islam, because that's not such a big deal here. I think
Thank you. Mar?
All of religions, in my opinion, they have all of these sects. So in the Islam, actually, we don't have that many sects. We have Shia and Sunni. And in my opinion, I grew up, I never had any hearing of that. I grew up in Kuwait, which is half Shia and half Sunni. So, but I never was introduced to, oh, this is Shia, or this is Sunni, or this is a Christian, or it's a human being. This is how I grew up, and this is how I know we are humans. I don't see people as sects. So, in my opinion, with time, I can see it becomes with Al-Qaeda and all of these things, ISIS and all of that. That's my own analysis. It's all political. It's all political. We all believe in the same Quran. We both believe in God. Very small differences in history happened 1400 years ago, and that doesn't justify killings or anything. So in my opinion, it's all political.
Thank you. And so we have a series of questions that are left that have to do very much with what you just touched on, which is the root problems of religious fundamentalism, extremism, and state-sponsored terrorism that's as a result of that's associated with religion. So what I want to say about that is I think that we're all here because we're people who wish to understand across faith and to not take the extreme position. So that's something to think about and how we respond to that. But what I want to ask you to do now, and if any of you want to respond to those, I think that's important to do, but is to take just a few minutes to respond just very quickly, each of you, and this will be our final question, then I hope some of you will stay after to answer other questions. I got to almost everyone, at least one question. A number of you sent in a number, which I appreciate. But just what did we not talk about yet today that you want to make sure we talk about? And it may be about religious intolerance, it may be about fundamentalism, it may be about state-sponsored religious terror, but what is it that you'd like to make sure we put out before we close today? And let's just start with Ijaz and we'll go down the row. Did you have the mic?
So I'll go back to where I started, that there is this notion that Islam is at war with the West or with America. And nothing can be further from the truth. Even if we take them for face value, what ISIS is doing, I mean, they are the #1 terrorist organization right now. But that can change. I mean, 10 years ago it was Al-Qaeda, a few years ago it was some other organization, and now it's ISIS, and a few years down the line it will be something else. So the question we have to ask is this: why is it that ISIS or similar organizations, if they are against the West, they have never attacked Switzerland, as far as I know. They have never attacked so many other Western countries. And why is it that, this is food for thought, I'm not going to provide the answer. Why is it that a lot of these terrorist organizations only arise from the areas that we, the West, invade? So we invaded, or we were part of the struggle in Afghanistan, and from there, ashes grew Al-Qaeda and Taliban, right? Then we did a few things in Iraq. And then we were in Iraq and neighboring areas when, right under our nose, ISIS grew, okay? So whether or not we were directly involved or indirectly involved, it happened. And they have American weapons, okay? So we have to, again, ask, so people ask, like, how do we defeat terrorism? And so we have never asked the root causes. And again, we think it is about religion. And it is not about religion. Because if it was about religion, then the Islamic State, so-called Islamic State, would not be killing Muslims. But the fact of the matter is they have killed many more Muslims than they have killed Americans or other Westerners. Actually, we can count the American lives that have been lost, but they have killed thousands of Muslims. And same is true for Al-Qaeda. Actually, go to Pakistan or other Islamic countries, there are more, so when they actually, 153 kids died in Peshawar, Pakistan, all under the age of 17. They were all Muslims. So this notion that this is war between Islam and the West is far from the truth. So I think we need to remove that once and for all. And we have to think about what is it that keeps producing new groups of terrorism. And it goes back to injustices. I'm not actually, by the way, making any excuses. But when we keep invading and removing regimes, I will invite you to a Wesley Clark interview. He's no ordinary person. Wesley Clark gave an interview to NPR. It's about 4.5 minutes long. He told a story about when he was at the Bush administration, then one of the very senior military commander came out and said, we are going to go and attack Iraq, and the 7 countries he named: Iraq, Iran, Syria, Libya, Somalia, and there were 2 other countries I cannot think of. And Wesley Clark asked, why? And he said, but we are military people, we don't ask questions. And so since then, we have invaded at least 5 of those 7 countries, one way or another. And all of those countries are completely destabilized. We removed dictators. We are in the business of regime change. It was part of the Republican debate. We should not be part of the regime change, because whenever we do the regime change, we have seen what happens in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and even Syria. So we may not like the dictators, but we should also be very careful what we wish for.
Yes, and there was actually one of the NPR stories this morning spoke right to that point, so thank you. Thank you.
the theme I have been using for a long time, that don't let terrorists hijack my religion. Resolve the chronicle disputes in the Muslim world. Promote peace and justice. Eliminate poverty. All these elements are exploited by some terrorist groups, and they are able to recruit people. Like this Shabab in Somalia is projecting a speech by Donald Trump, who is saying that we should prevent Muslims from coming to America. And they are saying that, look, America is against you, so the best way for you is to join us. And that is wrong. But we should really work hard in order to prevent these terrorist groups from exploitation, the frustration, the anger, the poverty, the ignorance of certain people, and utilize them as terrorists or as suicide bombers to kill others in the name of religion, while religion is innocent from such practices. We cannot accept those people who are saying that they are defending Islam by killing themselves and killing other civilians. That is wrong. That is not un-Islamic. That is not related to Islam. And therefore, we have to work together. And we believe that the United States is having the capability of leading the world by resolving the chronicle, political, socio-economic issues in the world in order to prevent terrorists from exploiting the anger of people and utilize them in their criminal action against civilians and against others.
Thank you.
So one thing that and this might be an interesting closing comment, but one thing that I will say is that just as with any other faith traditions, there are always going to be ways that things are interpreted that are problematic. There are going to be words or concepts that are going to be problematic. And one of the things that, one of the gifts that I have found within the Islamic traditions is this idea of using reason when it comes to coming across these ideas or these words or these passages and stories that we can't quite wrap our heads around because it doesn't seem to fit with the narrative of peace and justice that we're trying to create and understand here. And so what I would say is when you do come across that, to remember that reason and to remember that a lot of these things that have been used that are confusing were presented within a particular context. And they were presented within a context that isn't ours today, and that we can kind of reinterpret and, if need be, leave behind. And so there are those things that we didn't talk about nearly as much, but it's a part of every other faith tradition. So just to think about that a little bit.
Thank you.
I guess a lot of things have trickled down, so to speak, to me. One of the things I want to leave you with is this, and I think about this all the time. When you hear the word terrorism or extremists, ISIL, ISIS, Daesh, whatever you want to call it, don't immediately think Islam. Just sort of disabuse yourself of that, because it's a trick. It's like the Jedi mind trick. We're not the droid you're looking for. Well, Islam has nothing whatsoever to do with what's going on with ISIS. Those things were planned out. Why would you destabilize an entire area? Everything is destabilized. Everything has fallen apart. That was intentional. I always say follow the money. I always say follow the money. Yeah, and you will get to the root quicker, a more direct route. and it's not what you think it is. Trust me. And they don't want Americans to know that. They don't want Americans to know the truth. And understand that this destabilization is not just in the Middle East, but it's also in Africa. You hear very little about what goes on in Africa, but follow that as well.
Thank you. Eileen? Yeah.
I've been wondering why I'm part of this panel, but I am on the Interfaith Council. I'm the current treasurer, and I think my experience is all, getting involved in interfaith activities, discussions, meals, films, and I love it. But our Interfaith Council here in Contra Costa County is not very well funded. And I'm the second treasurer this year because it's a very anxiety-producing job.
It is,
so when you said follow the money, I'll say it's not with the Interfaith Council. But in order to stay organized, to have a little office, to have a part-time director, Will McGarvey, to have someone do our mailings, have a little money for MailChimp and those kinds of programs that help us send you emails and things. Getting involved and giving to Interfaith Council are an important part of doing our work here in this county. So
thank you. I want to get Abdul, and did you have anything, Abdul, you would like to say? And okay, and then yes, go ahead.
So I'll just say a few last things. So you talked about funding. So Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County is not well funded, but ISIS is.
Mm-hmm.
There was a report, not a report actually, this is Yahoo News, that a Saudi prince had donated, not in the past, previous, about a year and a half ago, $28 million. This is another true story. You won't hear this in the media. ISIS controls areas that are all producing. They are still producing oil and selling it. How are they able to sell it? They're not just, putting in a little bag and going out some places. They're going through Turkey. So our allies are involved in actually funding them, and we know that. If I know it, Yahoo News knows it, then we think Washington, D.C. does not know it, or the news media does not know it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's all, people make it to be a religious war. It is far from a war on religion or war about religion. I'll leave with a few thoughts about just some bullet points. According to the UN, 76% of the acts of terrorism that's based on religion were actually caused by non-Muslims or non-Islamic related. 76%. You never hear about that. We don't hear much about the genocide in Burma committed by Buddhists against Muslims. We don't hear about the Kashmiris, Muslims dying, or the Hindu terrorism, and so on and so forth. Like I said, these are UN numbers, not our numbers. 76% of them are caused or committed by non-Muslims. But I'll come back to some of the teachings of Islam. First of all, going back to the interfaith invitation in the Quran, there is a verse that actually talks about it, and it talks about dealing with interfaith dialogue. And there's a verse, 29:46. It says, when you deal with people of the book, Christians or Jews and others, do this in the best of manners. Do this in the best of manners. You're talking about manners, and that's how it starts. And I remind a lot of my friends that the most often prophet in the Quran that's mentioned by name is not Prophet Muhammad. It's actually Prophet Moses. Okay? Muhammad is actually only mentioned by name only 4 times. Actually, 3 times as Muhammad, 1 time as Ahmad. So, and then Mary is actually mentioned by name in the Quran many more times than she is in the Gospel. In fact, there's a chapter in the Quran named after her. Actually, that's the only chapter in the Quran that's named after a woman. So many of these are not known by even Muslims. So we need to make sure that when we talk about this, this is the othering effect. Once you get to know people, the perception changes. So my plea is try to get to know your Muslim neighbor. If I was sitting in a mostly Muslim audience, I'll actually say the opposite. I'll say, get out to your neighbors also. Get to know them too.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Islamic teaching, is to get to know your neighbor.
Thank you. But you know what, I'm going to, Abdul, did you have anything? We do have to actually, as you can tell, there is much to be said.
I feel like an athlete with a baton.
Yeah.
Missing. He just stole what I was going to say at the end, is that knowing your neighbor is the key, is it not? So, it's upon us, and I think we're doing what we can to get to know our neighbors. The same thing needs to happen with everybody else. If you want to have a peaceful outcome, if you want to live in harmony. And believe me, it is a lot more beautiful to have neighbors with different views than to have them all with the same.
Mm-hmm.
It is very beautiful. So, whenever you see somebody, being attacked or being cornered, come to the rescue. Talk to those neighbors. Talk to them, because believe me, just talking to them will go ahead and bring down the curtains. And my suggestion to Will and the Interfaith Council was to go ahead and get the word out to all the ministries, all the congregations. Try to go and speak about this at least, I would say, once a week, to go ahead and get the word out about this particular problem that we have. If you have misconceptions about, not just about Muslims, just anybody who is not Christian or who is not like us, bring those barriers down. God has created us equally, and so get to know our neighbors, and that'll make this world right here, this area here, a lot more beautiful than we can imagine.
Thank you. Miriam? Miriam.
I would like to inform you that I did research on the Quran, and there are 25 times in which God, Allah, is commanding Muslims to respect their commitments, their obligations, their contracts. And I interpret that we Muslims who came to this country and became citizens and gave our pledge to respect the law and to be law-abiding citizens, that is part of our commitment to Allah also, not only to the judge who granted us the citizenship.
Right.
And accordingly, true Muslims cannot be but law-abiding citizens, respecting the law, and non-violent. That is the characteristic of Muslims in accordance with the Quran.
Thank you.
I will end with a personal experience. So 4 years ago, I was watching all of the news and Fox News. My son always watches Fox News. So, and it was like so hard on me. So I decided to act. I didn't want just to stay, assimilating with the community and working, everything working well, fine. So I joined an interfaith women's circle, which is the same thing we are doing here, so people will know their neighbors and see like Muslims are humans like us. There is no difference, and it's not one-dimensional person. So I did that 4 years ago, and from there, all my interfaith work started, and I am so thankful. These are the joys I have for the last 4 years. I feel I grow so much, and I feel I know more, and I get like deeper understanding of my own religion, and also more open-minded and knowing more about, because our interfaith women's circles are Abrahamic, so Jewish and Christians. So I know more about Jewish traditions and Christian traditions. And at the end, it's all of us, in my opinion, we all we all want our world to be better place, and that's all what religion is. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to say that it is important for us to know our neighbors of all faiths. And I want to thank our panelists today. And, you know, this has been a passionate and full 2 hours, and that is a lot of time. But on the other hand, if you think about that 2 hours in the face of how many hours of other coverage, information, stereotypes, and misinformation we hear in an average week, it's not very much time at all. So I want to thank our panelists for being willing to be honest and bold. And I want to also recognize that we have among us a member of the Concord Council. Just want to invite him to stand, and I hope we can thank him later for his courageous willingness to speak out against Islamophobia in our own communities. And I want to also, again, thank the members of our congregation can stay and help us clean up. That will keep Renoir and I from being here till the wee hours of the morning. And we'll talk to you afterward. But let's just, with great reverence and appreciation, thank our panel. And I hope we'll invite them to come down, and if you want to come ask them a question, we can do so. But thank you again for being here, for giving of your time.